High Translator Morric Pell corrected Anessa Lorn's mouth in front of the dragon court. Not her words. Her mouth. Not Vren, he said, smiling as if kindness had teeth. Vray. N. Open the vowel. Court language rises cleanly. Border speech drags itself through mud. A few nobles laughed. The sound moved around the old dragon treaty room like silk over a blade. Anessa stood beside the Ember Translation Table with her hands folded before her, nails pressed lightly into her palms, her face still enough to look obedient from a distance. The table beneath her was a slab of black fireglass veined with dead gold. Around its edge, old treaty marks lay cold beneath layers of royal oil, polished so often by court hands that no one remembered the ash that had first sealed them. The Ember Translation Table did not choose speakers. It did not bless accents. It did not crown translators. It answered only the sound that matched the first binding. Vow, breath, border consonant, dragonfire pause, and every word that had been buried under court polish. Tonight, before Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn and the border envoys, the dead treaty would be renewed. Tonight, the words spoken from this room would decide another generation of flame debt, and they were laughing at her vowel. Morric lifted the ivory translation rod from Anessa's fingers before she could tighten her grip around it. You have done enough preparation work, Mistress Lorn. The formal reading requires a voice fit for peace. Anessa looked at his hand on the rod, not at his face. If she looked at his face, she might speak too soon. Behind Morric, the court translator he had chosen waited in pale blue robes, chin lifted, mouth soft and polished, from years of saying nothing dangerous beautifully. Lord envoys from the inner provinces watched with mild amusement. Border elders stood farther back, permitted into the room but not near the table, their travel-worn cloaks still smelling faintly of rain, smoke, and horse leather. Anessa knew that smell. It was the first language she had ever trusted. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn sat at the far end of the room beneath the hanging bones of the first treaty dragon. He wore black court armor scaled in ember bronze, one hand resting on the arm of his carved stone chair, his face unreadable. Candlelight sharpened the dark planes of his cheekbones and caught in the gold ring at his throat. He did not laugh, but he did not stop them either. That mattered more. Morric turned toward him with a bow. Majesty, for the dignity of the renewal, I recommend Mistress Lorn observe from the rear wall. Her border knowledge has been useful in draft comparison, but the spoken ceremony requires clarity. Clarity. Anessa had learned to hate that word. It meant, not your voice. It meant, we will use what you know after removing the sound of you from it. Rhyser's eyes moved to her. For one breath, Anessa thought he might ask whether Morric was lying. He did not. Let the reading proceed cleanly, the king said. There was no cruelty in his voice. That made it worse. Morric's smile warmed. Of course, Majesty. Anessa stepped back from the Ember Translation Table. She did not bow. That was the only rebellion she could afford. Morric noticed. His eyes narrowed, but he had already won enough to be generous. From the rear wall, Mistress Lorn, the table responds poorly to provincial vibration. A court lady covered her mouth. Another laugh. This time, one of the border elders lowered his head. Not from shame, from fury he could not spend. Anessa walked to the rear wall. Each step felt longer than the treaty room. The floor beneath her was inlaid with old dragonbone script, every symbol copied into court language centuries after the first peace was sworn. The court believed translation had refined the treaty. Anessa knew refinement could be another word for theft. At the table, the polished court translator placed both hands on the fireglass and began. By flame, by crown, by conquered border, the clans remain in honored debt to the dragon throne. The Ember Translation Table cracked. Not loudly, a thin sound. Like a glass throat, remembering pain. The translator stopped. Morric moved fast. Continue. The man swallowed and tried again. By flame, by crown, by conquered border, the words on the table ignited. Golden fire ran under the dead treaty marks and turned the polished court translation to ash. Not parchment ash, word ash. The spoken phrase itself burned in the air, curling black before it could reach the ceiling. The court fell still. Rhyser rose from his chair. Morric's face did not change quickly enough to seem innocent. Ancient residue, he said. The treaty sometimes resists renewal heat. Anessa stood against the rear wall, her pulse beating in her throat. The table had not resisted heat. It had rejected a false mouth. The translator tried a third time, voice shaking now. By flame, by crown. This time the table split a line of gold straight down its center. The man stumbled back, clutching his hand as if burned. The old treaty marks rose from the fireglass, not as letters, but as narrow golden threads, twisting and snapping like thin glass in flame. They turned toward Morric, then toward the court translator, then toward Rhyser. Nothing. No answer. No voice. Morric's hand tightened around the ivory rod. Bring the Southern pronunciation register. No. The word came from Anessa before she decided to spend it. Every face turned. She had spoken from the rear wall, in her own accent, low border, smoke heavy. The vowel Morric had corrected still unpolished in her mouth. Rhyser looked at her sharply. Morric did too, but his expression held fear under anger. Do not interrupt treaty renewal, Morric said. Anessa stepped away from the wall. Then stop murdering the first line. A sound moved through the room. Not laughter now. Whis, ho. Morric's eyes flashed. Majesty, remove her. Rhyser did not move. Not yet. Anessa took another step. The word is not conquered. Morric snapped. Do not speak dead language without sanction. It is not dead, Anessa said. You only buried it under court vowels. The Ember Translation Table flared. Golden threads rose higher, turning toward her mouth. Anessa stopped walking. The heat touched her lips without burning them. For the first time all night, the room heard the treaty breathe. A treaty remembers the voice. Anessa did not know whether the thought was hers or the table's. She only knew the oldest border word in the room had opened behind her teeth. Fron, she said. Not clean. Not polished. True. The table did not answer her blood. It answered the word. The Ember Translation Table answered. Every court translation on its surface burned to ash at once. The golden treaty marks flew upward, not circling her body, but bending toward the sound still alive in her mouth. Then the dead treaty spoke. Not in Morric's polished court voice. Not in the hired translator's smooth ceremony tone. Not in Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn's royal command. It spoke in Anessa Lorn's border accent, clear enough for every noble and every border elder to understand. The first piece was not sworn by conquest. Morric went white. Rhyser stepped down from the throne platform, his face hard, stunned, and suddenly dangerous. Anessa did not look at him. She looked at the border elders, standing at the back of the room where truth had also been made to stand. The dead treaty burned brighter, and in Anessa's voice, it began the line Morric had spent years trying to keep buried. Rhyser looked from the burning treaty marks to Morric Pell's ivory rod. His voice did not soften. What was the first line before he translated it? Morric Pell answered before the treaty could finish breathing. Old border vowels are unstable, he said, voice sharp under the golden firelight. They can awaken residue. They cannot bind royal renewal. The dead treaty pulsed on the Ember Translation Table, not like a heart, like a mouth deciding whether to speak again. Anessa Lorn stood halfway between the rear wall and the table, every eye in the old dragon treaty room fixed on her as if her voice had become a weapon. She could still feel the word vrain behind her teeth. Not clean. Not polished. True. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn did not look at her gently. Good. Gentleness would have been another kind of theft. He looked from the burning treaty marks to Morric's ivory rod. What was the first line before he translated it? No apology entered his voice. Anessa did not want one. Not while the border elders still stood at the back of the room like witnesses allowed to breathe only after the court had finished deciding what their lives meant. Morric lifted the ivory rod. It was smooth, pale, and covered in tiny correction notches where generations of translators had marked official pronunciation. Majesty, the authorized first line has always been rendered. By flame, by crown, by conquered border, the clans remain in honored debt to the dragon throne. The table hissed. One gold vein in the fireglass blackened. Morric's hand tightened, but he kept speaking. The border form is older, yes, but old does not mean legal. A treaty renewed by court power must be spoken in court language. Anessa stepped closer. Then why did court language burn? A murmur passed among the nobles. Morric turned toward her, his smile thin. Because you disrupted the vow-breath. There it was. Not denial. Redirection. Anessa looked at the ivory rod. Show the first correction mark. Morric's eyes cooled. You no longer stand at the table. No, Anessa said. You removed me before it spoke. Rhyser's gaze cut to Morric. Show it. Morric hesitated just long enough for Anessa to know where the wound lay. Then he turned the ivory rod. Along its lower side, near the grip, a burned notch marked the opening phrase. Beside it sat the court correction. The vowel widened, the consonant softened, the pause after flame erased. To most nobles, it looked like scholar's craft. To Anessa, it looked like a hand held over someone's mouth. She did not touch the rod. She read it. The old line does not begin with crown, she said. Morric spoke quickly. The crown is implied in all royal treaties. The old line begins with shared flame. The border elders lifted their heads. The room changed. Not loudly. Not yet. But Anessa felt it the way forgotten people stand straighter when a buried word remembers them. Morric gave a short laugh. Shared flame is ceremonial metaphor. Anessa looked at him. A metaphor does not collect taxes for 3 generations. The words struck the room harder than the treaty's crack. Rhyser's expression did not soften, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Flame debt. Morric bowed slightly. A lawful obligation of the border clans after rebellion. Wartime service, Anessa said. Morric's face tightened. She heard it then, the place his silence tried to cover. The dead treaty had not finished the first line because Morric had spent years making sure no one in court heard what came after shared flame. Rhyser stepped closer to the table. Speak the line. Morric said, Majesty, allowing unsanctioned border pronunciation to bind renewal could undermine every debt ledger in the western provinces. Speak the line, Rhyser repeated. Anessa did not move. Rhyser turned to her. For a dangerous breath, his attention felt like heat on skin. Not desire, not yet. Recognition, unwanted and late. Anessa lifted her chin. Not for them alone. The court stirred. Morric seized on it. You see, she refuses royal command. No, Anessa said. I refuse to give the court my voice while the people harmed by the lies stand behind velvet ropes. Rhyser looked toward the border elders at the rear wall. Morric went still. Small. But Anessa saw it. The border families hear it here, she said, or I do not speak it. A noblewoman gasped. She bargains with the Dragon King? Anessa did not look away from Rhyser. No. I name the condition the treaty was built on. A vow spoken over absent people is not peace, it is accounting. The dead treaty flared, not around her, toward the sound of the old claws. Rhyser lifted one hand. The guards near the rear ropes froze. Then he said, "Let them forward." Morric turned, "Majesty. Let them hear what was taken from them." Still no apology, but the velvet ropes were lowered. Border elders walked toward the Ember Translation Table with wet eyes and locked jaws. Their boots left rain-dark marks on the polished floor. The court watched as if mud itself had entered law. Anessa waited until the eldest woman stood close enough to see the fireglass. Then she spoke, slowly, in the border voice Morric had corrected. By shared flame, by kept breath, by border blood given freely, no clan shall owe flame. Debt after service is fulfilled. The Ember Translation Table answered. The burned conquest phrase collapsed into ash. Golden words rose from the fireglass, not as a blessing, not as a crown, but as the old legal line returning to its proper shape. Rhyser stared at the table. Morric's ivory rod cracked from grip to tip. Across the black fireglass, the dead treaty burned one clear truth for the court to see. First piece said shared flame, not conquered debt. Rhyser looked from the burning line to the debt ledgers stacked beneath Morric Pell's ivory case. His voice did not soften. Then which line renewed the flame? Debt? Morric Pell reached for the debt ledgers before the king did. That was his first mistake. Not because he touched them, because he touched the wrong one first. Anessa Lorn saw his hand pass over the old brown ledger with cracked border binding and close, instead around the newer ivory-cased volume stamped with the Dragon Court seal. Clean cover, clean corners, clean law, too clean. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn saw her looking. He did not ask gently, "Which ledger?" Anessa kept her eyes on Morric's hand. The one he did not want first. Morric's smile thinned. "Majesty. Debt ledgers are renewed by crown statute, not merely treaty wording. The border clans owe flame debt because the court ratified the obligation for 3 generations." Rhyser's face remained hard. Then which line renewed the flame debt? No apology. No softness. Only the next cut of investigation. Anessa preferred that. An apology would not loosen one chain from a border family's door. Morric opened the ivory-cased ledger and turned it toward the king. "Here, renewal clause 3rd register. By flame, by crown, by conquered border, all debt remains until royal release." The Ember Translation Table gave a low hiss. Not enough to speak. Enough to warn. Anessa stepped closer, but stopped before the table's edge. She would not let Morric claim she had forced the treaty's mouth open. "Read the breath mark," she said. Morric looked at her. "There is no breath mark in court statute." "There should be." He laughed softly. "Court law is written for clarity, Mistress Lorn, not for rustic pauses. Clarity is not what you call changing service into debt." The border elders behind her did not cry out. They did something heavier. They stood still. Every face turned toward the ledgers as if one wrong word might cost them another lifetime. Rhyser extended his hand. "Give her sight of the claws." Morric hesitated. Only a breath, but the dead treaty still remembered breath. The golden lines in the fireglass dimmed, then flared along the edge closest to the old brown ledger. Anessa did not touch the table. She pointed to the ivory translation rod in Morric's hand. The first correction notch erased the pause after shared flame. "Show the matching mark in the debt ledger." Morric's voice cooled. "There is no matching mark. Ledgers are fiscal records." "Then why does your ivory rod carry a ledger notch?" The room tightened. Rhyser looked at the rod. Morric did not lower it quickly enough. Along the ivory shaft, beneath the cracked first-line correction, A smaller notch had been carved in the same hand. Not pronunciation. Numbering. A debt register mark disguised among vowels. Anessa read it from where she stood. Third register. Same mark as the flame debt renewal clause. Morric closed his fingers over the notch. Court translators standardize old metaphors for legal clarity. Anessa looked at the border elders. At the eldest woman who had stepped forward when the ropes were lowered, at the young man beside her whose sleeve was patched at the wrist, where tax collectors had probably taken coin before winter. Then she looked back at Morric. You standardized shared flame into conquered border. Morric's smile sharpened. Shared flame is poetry. Court language is enforceable. Rhyser's eyes darkened. Morric bowed at once. Majesty, I speak of legal structure only. Without firm wording, the court cannot govern old obligations. Wartime service fulfilled is not an old obligation, Anessa said. It is a debt already paid. She reached toward the old brown ledger. Morric snapped, Do not touch that. Anessa stopped with her fingers above the cover. Not because he commanded her, because she wanted the court to see which record frightened him. Rhyser said, Open it. Morric did not. The eldest border woman stepped forward. Her voice was rough from age and road dust. That ledger was ours before the court copied it. Morric turned on her. Border memory is not legal archive. No, Anessa said, but archive is not truth when a translator cuts the breath out of it. Rhyser took the brown ledger himself and opened it on the Ember Translation Table. The fireglass did not crown it, did not bless it. It only warmed beneath the old binding, answering the vow-breath still caught in the written line. Anessa leaned over the page. The border script was cramped, smoke-dark, older than court polish. She read the clause slowly. Shared flame held until service ends. Breath returned. No debt remains. The ivory ledger beside it gave off a faint, burned smell. Anessa looked at the renewal phrase again. In the clean court copy, the breath pause after service had been removed. Without that pause, the sentence turned. Service did not end debt. Service fed debt. One missing breath. 3 generations of payment. She felt anger rise, but she kept it out of her voice. Anger was too easy for Morric to name unstable. The renewal clause was built from the false conquest line, she said, not the original shared flame clause. Morric's face hardened. Interpretation. No, Anessa said. Sequence. Rhyser looked from the old ledger to the ivory one. Show the court. Anessa pointed, not touching. Here is shared flame. Here is fulfilled service. Here is breath returned. In his court renewal, conquered border replaces shared flame, and the breath pause is gone. That is how service became debt. The dead treaty burned brighter, but it did not speak for her. It did not need to. The ledgers lay open. The rod carried the matching notch. The missing pause had done its work in ink. Morric lifted his chin. Majesty, if every old breath mark is allowed to overturn modern statute, the border will challenge all flame debt. The treasury will bleed. The treaty renewal will collapse. Anessa answered before Rhyser could. No, the lie will collapse. The ivory-cased ledger cracked along the renewal clause. Golden heat ran through the false wording, stopping at the erased breath mark. Then the dead treaty burned one line across the open ledger, bright enough for the border elders and the dragon court to see. Flame debt, renewed from false conquest line. Rhyser looked from the burning renewal clause to the royal certification seal pressed beneath it. His voice did not soften. Who certified the renewal copy after the breath mark was removed? Morric Pell looked at the royal certification seal as if it had betrayed him. Only for a breath. Then he became polished again. Certification seals confirm format, he said. They do not examine ancient breath marks. That is the translator's office. The registrar certified what was prepared for court renewal. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn did not look away from the seal pressed beneath the burning claws. Who certified the renewal copy after the breath mark was removed? His voice did not soften. Anessa Lorn was glad. Softness would have made the court sigh, and sighing was how nobles cleaned blood from law without touching it. Morric bowed slightly. Royal Registrar Helvin Dor, a faithful servant of the crown for 30 years. If you drag his seal into this, Majesty, you accuse the archive itself. The archive is not the crown, Rhyser said. No, Anessa said, but the crown likes it better when archives sound clean. Several nobles turned toward her. Rhyser did too. She did not lower her eyes. He had let them laugh at her mouth. He did not get gratitude because he had finally begun asking the correct questions. Morric opened the ivory ledger wider. The renewal copy was legal. It carried the registrar's seal, the translator's preparation mark, and the crown's acceptance line. Show the acceptance line, Anessa said. Morric's fingers stilled. There. Not enough to convict him. Enough to read. You no longer stand at the table, he said. I am not reading the table. She pointed to the lower edge of the ledger. I am reading the seal pressure. Rhyser reached for the ledger before Morric could close it. Morric did not resist. That would have looked guilty. He only stepped back with a face made of injured dignity. The king turned the ledger toward Anessa. She did not touch it. The royal certification seal sat beneath the renewal clause in red-black wax, pressed deep into the parchment. Around it, the fibers had buckled slightly, as if the seal had been applied while the ink was still warm. Anessa leaned closer. The room smelled of hot amber, burning parchment, and old ash caught in the throat. The seal pressed after the breath mark was gone, she said. Morric sighed. Again with breath marks. No, Anessa said. Again with sequence. The border elders stood behind her now, no longer kept at the wall. They did not speak, but their silence had weight. It stood beside her like another record. Anessa pointed to the renewal clause. The original breath pause should fall between service ends and breath returned. In this copy, the parchment dips where the pause was scraped thin. Then the certification seal presses over the scraped fibers. Rhyser's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Meaning the registrar certified a prepared silence. Morric snapped. The registrar certified what translators prepared. That is the function of office. Then the crown sealed a silence it never bothered to hear. The sentence cut across the treaty room. This time, Rhyser flinched. Not visibly enough for the court. Enough for Anessa. Good. Let it enter him. Morric seized the opening. Majesty, this is exactly why border dialect cannot govern renewal. She turns clerical procedure into moral accusation. Anessa looked at the ivory rod in his hand. You turned moral debt into clerical procedure. The Ember Translation Table warmed under the old brown ledger, but it did not speak. Its dead gold veins only brightened near the first line, where the breath pause still lived in border script. Anessa read the two copies side by side. Old brown ledger. Shared flame. Service fulfilled. Breath returned. Ivory renewal copy. Conquered border. Debt remains. Royal release. Between them lay the missing pause. Not a word. A held breath. The place where freedom had once stood. Bring the archive copy, Rhyser said. Morric's face changed again. Smaller this time. Majesty, the archive copy is sealed for renewal completion. Then open it before completion. A guard went to the side chamber where the treaty archives were kept behind bronze lattice. He returned with a long gray case, its clasp marked by the royal registrar's square seal. Morric reached for it. Rhyser said, No, One word, cold enough to stop him. The guard set the case on the Ember Translation Table. The fireglass did not bless it, did not choose it. It only reflected the old wax pressure already pressed into the case. Anessa bent over the clasp. The registrar mark is whole. Morric exhaled. As it should be. But the intake mark is not. Rhyser looked at her. Show me. She pointed to a broken crescent beside the seal. The archive received an attachment with the renewal copy. Something was lifted before certification. The wax tore here. Morric's voice hardened. Archive attachments are often removed when duplicate language is redundant. A breath mark is not duplicate language. It is not language at all. Anessa looked at him. That is why you cut it out. The archive case clicked open. Inside lay a pale treaty copy, clean and stiff, the kind of document meant to survive centuries by erasing the hands that had made it. The renewal clause shone in polished court script. No breath mark. No border pause. No service release. But beneath the royal certification seal, near the lower fold, a faint shadow remained where the parchment had once carried a small pause stroke. Anessa did not need the table. She did not need magic. She saw the scraped place. Rhyser saw it too. Morric stepped back from the table. The dead treaty burned brighter, but Anessa spoke first. The renewal copy was certified after the breath mark had already been erased. Morric's jaw tightened. That is interpretation. No, Anessa said. Sequence. Golden fire ran along the archive copy, stopping at the scraped pause and the registrar's seal pressed over it. Then the dead treaty burned one line across the clean parchment. Renewal copy certified after breath mark was erased. The clean archive copy tried to curl away from the burned line. Not from flame, from memory. Anessa Lorn watched the pale parchment bend at the scraped pause, its polished court script warping around the place where breath had been taken out. The words renewal copy certified after breath mark was erased glowed across the document, bright enough to stain the royal registrar's seal gold. Morric Pell recovered before the nobles did. Certification after preparation is not fraud, he said. It is order. Translators prepare. Registrars certify. The crown accepts. That is how law survives centuries without being dragged backward by every dialect grievance. A border elder's hand closed around the edge of her cloak. Anessa heard the cloth strain. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn stood at the Ember Translation Table with the archive copy open before him. His face had gone still in the dangerous way of kings beginning to understand that the room they commanded had been built to hide things from them. Who prepared the copy before certification? He asked. His voice did not soften. Morric bowed. My office prepared the renewal language, as my office has always done. Anessa looked at the ivory rod in his hand. He held it too carefully now. Not like a tool, like a throat. Show the preparation mark, she said. Morric did not look at her. The king asked me. And you answered around the missing hand. The nobles murmured. Rhyser's eyes cut to the rod. Show it. Morric's smile thinned. Majesty, translator preparation marks are internal. They do not govern legal meaning. No, Anessa said. They govern what legal meaning reaches the crown. That silenced the room more effectively than flame. Morric turned the ivory rod only because refusing would have looked worse. Near the cracked first-line correction and the hidden debt register notch, another mark sat close to the grip. 3 shallow cuts, 1 long pause, 1 short, 1 missing. Anessa knew that pattern. Every border child learned it before they learned court script. It was the witness measure used when 2 peoples swore peace without surrendering tongue, fire, or dead. Her stomach tightened. Morric saw recognition cross her face and spoke quickly. Preparation mark for ceremonial cadence. No, Anessa said. Witness cadence. Rhyser looked at her. Explain. Not gently. Still late. Still necessary. The first treaty was not renewed by Crown voice alone, Anessa said. When flame, debt, land passage, or border service was named, the clause required a border witness voice before certification. Morric laughed. Ancient performance custom. Legal safeguard. Dead custom. The treaty just answered it. The Ember Translation Table warmed beneath the archive copy, but did not speak. It only brightened near the margin Anessa had not yet named. She pointed to the lower fold of the parchment. There. Rhyser angled the copy toward the candlelight. At first, the court saw nothing but clean parchment. Then the heat from the table revealed a faint row of dots under the erased breath mark. Not letters, not words. Speaking rests. Places where a witness voice had to pause for the treaty to bind. Morric's jaw tightened. Decorative cadence marks. Anessa looked toward the border elders. Mother Sael. The eldest woman lifted her head. Morric snapped. She has no place in court examination. She was brought forward by the king, Anessa said, and the treaty was built on voices like hers. Rhyser did not look away from the margin. Let her answer. Mother Sael stepped closer to the table. She did not touch the parchment. She did not need to. Her old voice came rough and low, carrying rain road and smoke. Those are not decoration, she said. Those are waiting places. A nobleman whispered, Waiting for what? For us, Mother Sael answered. The old dragon treaty room changed again. Not with shock this time. With history finding its feet. Morric's face hardened. Border memory cannot override certified archive. Anessa looked at him. Then why did your preparation mark copy the witness cadence before removing the witness voice? He did not answer. That was his second mistake. Rhyser's hand closed around the edge of the table. Was a border witness called before this renewal copy was certified? Morric's eyes moved not to Anessa, not to the king, but to the velvet ropes now lying on the floor. The answer was there. No, Anessa said. They were kept at the back of the room. Morric turned on her. Because witnesses observe, they do not govern translation. A witness who cannot speak is furniture. The words struck the court hard enough to make several nobles look away. Rhyser's gaze dropped to the ropes, the same ropes he had allowed to stand there. Anessa saw the knowledge enter him. Not apology. Not yet. But the first shape of personal guilt. He had not made the ropes, perhaps, but he had sat above them. Morric lifted the ivory rod. Majesty, if border witnesses are granted speech authority, every renewal of flame debt can be challenged. Anessa said, only the false ones. The fireglass beneath the archive copy flared. The scraped breath mark, the witness dots, and Morric's preparation cuts shone at once, 3 pieces of the same buried law. The dead treaty did not speak for Anessa. It did not need to. She read the pattern aloud before flame could make the room lazy. Breath returned. Witness heard. Debt ended unless renewed before both flame and border. The margin burned gold. Morric stepped back. Too late. Across the lower fold of the certified archive copy, old treaty fire revealed the line he had removed from ceremony. Border witness voice required before flame debt renewal. The velvet ropes on the floor began to smoke. Not from fire. From shame the room had finally learned how to see. Anessa Lorn looked down as thin gold heat crawled along the twisted cords that had kept the border families behind the court. The ropes did not burn through. They only darkened where hands had knotted them, where guards had dragged them into place, where law had been made to look like seating. Morric Pell moved before anyone could speak. Witness voice, he said, lifting both hands as if calming children. Not witness command. The clause requires presence. It does not grant border families authority to govern royal renewal. Mother Sael's mouth tightened. Anessa felt it more than saw it. Another correction, another narrowing, another polished hand trying to make a living word smaller. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn stood over the archive copy, the revealed line still glowing beneath his hand. You said witnesses observe. Morric bowed. They do. Their presence honors the old form. The treaty says voice. A ceremonial voice, Morric said. A response, perhaps. A blessing, not legal interruption. Anessa looked at him. You keep turning law into decoration when it frees someone poor. The court shifted. Morric's eyes sharpened. And you keep turning dialect into rebellion. Rhyser's gaze cut between them. Still no apology. Still no gentleness. Only the hard focus of a king realizing the room under his command had more locked doors than walls. Where is the witness register? He asked. Morric's answer came too smooth. Filed with attendance records. Bring it. A clerk hurried toward the bronze lattice archive chamber. Morric watched him go, and for the first time, Anessa saw the fear tell clearly, not his hand, not his mouth. His tongue touched the back of his teeth before he swallowed, as if stopping one border consonant from escaping by mistake. He knew the sound. He had always known it. The clerk returned with a narrow black register wrapped in pale cord. Morric reached for it. Rhyser took it first. The room noticed. So did Anessa. It was not trust. Not yet. But it was no longer automatic trust in Morric's clean hands. Rhyser opened the register on the edge of the Ember Translation Table. The fireglass did not flare. It only reflected the names written in neat court ink. Sael of North Ford, Bram of Ash Mile, Talon of Red Crossing, Evina of Salt Gate. Border names, real names. Beside each one, a court word had been written in a smaller column. Observee. Anessa's throat closed once. Morric spoke quickly. Standard classification. Witnesses observe. No, Anessa said. Her voice came out low. Morric smiled. There is no need for emotion, Mistress Lorn. Anessa looked at the names until anger became clean enough to use. There is every need. She pointed to Mother Sael's entry, not touching the page. A border witness mark has 2 strokes, one for presence, one for voice. This register has 1. Morric sighed. Because the crown does not record rustic emphasis marks. Mother Sael stepped closer. My mother signed with 2 strokes. The room turned toward her. Her hand trembled, but her voice did not. At the last renewal, I was a girl. I watched her put 1 mark for standing there and 1 for speaking. She told me never to let them take the second. Morric's face hardened. Memory again. Anessa looked at him. Memory is what people use when archives are edited by the powerful. Rhyser turned the register toward the candlelight. Show me the missing stroke. Anessa leaned in. There. A faint scrape ran beside Sael's name, almost invisible under fresh ink. Then another beside Bram's. Another beside Evina's. The second strokes had not been forgotten. They had been shaved away. Morric snapped. Old parchment sheds marks. Only the speaking ones? Anessa asked. No one laughed. The dead treaty warmed beneath the archive copy, but Anessa raised 1 hand before the golden marks could rise too far. No, she said softly. Let the register answer by itself. Rhyser looked at her. For 1 dangerous second, something almost tender crossed his face. Anessa refused it. Tenderness could wait until truth had a chair. She pointed to the cord around the register. The binding cord is pale, new, but the register should be tied in border black if witness voice was active. Morric said, "Court storage replaced old cords for preservation. Then where is the cut black thread?" The clerk holding the archive tray went pale. Morric saw him. Anessa saw Morric see him. "Ask the clerk," she said. Morric's voice dropped. "Do not drag minor servants into your performance. A witness who cannot speak is furniture," Anessa said. "A clerk who cannot answer is a tool." Rhyser turned to the clerk. "Answer." The young man swallowed. "There was black cord, Majesty." Morric closed his eyes for half a heartbeat. The clerk continued, voice shaking. "It was cut before the register came to the treaty room. High Translator Pell said observer classification required pale cord." Morric opened his eyes. "I said no such thing." The clerk flinched. Anessa did not press him further. Fear had already given the room enough. She looked at the register again, the scraped strokes, the pale cord, the observer column. The border families brought into the room but kept behind ropes. Presence without voice. Law without hearing. Peace without people. Rhyser's hand closed around the register's edge. When was the classification changed? Morric did not answer. The dead treaty did not speak. It did not need to. Mother Sael reached into her cloak and pulled out a small strip of black thread, frayed at one end, saved like a relic by someone who knew paper could be made to lie. She laid it beside her name. The fireglass answered the thread's old vow-breath with a low golden glow. Across the witness register, one burned line appeared beneath the observer column, "Border witnesses recorded as observers before renewal." The clerk began to shake before Morric Pell did. That was why Anessa Lorn looked at him first. Not at the burned line across the witness register. Not at the border elders standing beside the Ember Translation Table. Not even at Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn, whose hand still rested near the names that had been changed from witnesses into observers. The clerk knew there was another record. Morric knew she had seen him know. "Majesty," Morric said, his voice calm and the way locked doors were calm. "Even if witness classification was imperfect, the renewal is not invalid. The court may correct attendance language after ceremony." Mother Sael's black thread lay beside her scraped name, glowing faintly with old vow-breath. Anessa looked at it. "You cannot correct a voice after silencing it." Morric turned on her. "And you cannot bind a royal treaty by trespass." The room tightened. There it was. The blade he had saved. Rhyser's eyes narrowed. "What trespass?" Morric lowered the ivory rod as if it pained him to use law against her. Mistress Lorn was removed from the Ember Translation Table before the formal reading. She then spoke dead treaty language from outside her assigned station, awakened a dormant table, interrupted royal renewal, and forced border witnesses into the court circle without sanction. Anessa did not move. If she moved too quickly, fear would be named guilt. Morric looked toward the nobles. "This is not scholarship. This is unauthorized binding." A whisper passed through the court. Unauthorized. Dangerous. Border. The old words found new clothing. Rhyser looked at Anessa. "Still hard. Still unreadable. Were you removed from the table?" She met his gaze. "You allowed it." Silence struck the treaty room. Not gentle. Not romantic. True. Rhyser's face did not change enough for others to read. But Anessa saw the smallest tightening around his mouth. "Good. Let the truth sit there." Morric stepped smoothly into the wound. "Majesty, permission matters. If an unsanctioned voice can awaken treaty fire, any border speaker could challenge royal law by pronunciation alone." "No," Anessa said, "only if royal law is standing on a lie." Morric smiled thinly. "A clever sentence, not authority." He turned to the clerk. "Bring the voice sanction roll." The young clerk looked as if he might be sick. Rhyser's voice cut across the room. Bring it. No apology. No defense. Only command. The clerk disappeared into the archive chamber and returned with a narrow roll of black vellum sealed in pale amber wax. Anessa recognized the seal before it reached the table. Translator's office. Internal voice authority. Morric took it with careful hands. This time, Rhyser led him. That was the first thing that hurt. Not because she expected rescue, because some part of her had wanted the king to have learned faster. Morric broke the wax and unrolled the vellum beside the witness register. Names appeared in columns. Court translators, language assistants, ceremonial readers, border consultants. Beside Anessa's name, a red stroke cut through the final column. Voice restricted. Rhyser read it aloud, colder with each word. Anessa Lorn, border consultant. Preparation access permitted. Spoken treaty authority, restricted pending pronunciation review. The court stirred. Morric bowed his head. The restriction was entered before renewal began. She had knowledge access, not voice authority. Anessa felt the room shift away from her. Not all of it. The border elders did not move. But the nobles did. They liked this version better. It gave them a place to put their shame. Procedure. Restriction. Review. Morric looked at her with clean triumph. You were never authorized to speak into the treaty. Anessa looked at the red stroke through her name. She knew the shape of it, not the ink. The hand. Morric's. He had always corrected her vowels in the same motion. Downward first, then a hard cut across. When was it entered? She asked. Morric said, before renewal. That was not my question. Rhyser's gaze moved to her. The echo was not lost on him. Anessa pointed to the edge of the vellum. Read the hour mark. Morric did not. Rhyser took the roll from him. At the lower edge, the amber wax had spread over the timestamp, but not fully. A dark curve remained beneath it. Third bell afternoon, Rhyser said. Anessa turned toward the table. After I finished the draft comparison, Morric's mouth tightened. After I marked the first line wrong, she said. After I asked why conquered border appeared where shared flame belonged. The dead treaty warmed beneath the vellum. Anessa raised one hand before the golden fire could rise. No, she whispered. Let the record show its own breath. She leaned closer, not touching. Along the red restriction stroke, the ink had feathered where it crossed her title. Not dry ink over old parchment. Fresh ink pressed fast, then sealed before it settled. Voice restriction entered after I found the false line, she said. Morric snapped. You cannot prove motive. No, Anessa said. Only sequence. Rhyser's fingers tightened around the vellum. Anessa looked at him. That is all you have asked for since the table burned. Sequence. Here it is. Morric's voice rose for the first time. Majesty, if you allow her to continue, she will bind the treaty outside crown control. Anessa turned to him. The treaty was never yours to control alone. Dane, no. Not Dane. There was no roof here. No rods. No stone. Anessa forced herself back into the room, into the voice, into the table's heat. This was Morric's kingdom of cuts and polished vowels, and she would not let exhaustion make her sloppy. Morric lifted the ivory rod, then let the court decide. A restricted voice cannot renew, translate, correct, or challenge treaty language. If she speaks again, the dead treaty may bind unlawfully. One noble stood, then another. Fear liked company. Rhyser looked at the border elders, then at Anessa, then at the red stroke across her name. For the first time, he did not speak quickly. Anessa felt the delay like a hand closing around her throat. Morric saw it and smiled. The Ember Translation Table darkened beneath the voice roll, not choosing sides, only heeding the truth trapped under amber wax. The red stroke blistered. The hour mark burned through. Then one line appeared below Anessa's restricted name. Anessa Lorn's treaty voice restricted after false line was found. Morric Pell smiled at the burned line as if it had given him a door. Precisely, he said. Restricted after misconduct was discovered. The office acted to protect the renewal from interference. Anessa Lorn looked at the red stroke through her name, still blistering under the heat of the Ember Translation Table. Misconduct. That was what powerful men called finding the blade before it entered someone else's back. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn did not look away from the voice roll. The line says after the false line was found. The table interprets heat, Morric said, not motive. No, Anessa said. I interpret motive. The table only remembered the hour. Morric's eyes sharpened. And yet you remain restricted. There it was. The cage. Smaller now, but still a cage. A noble lord rose near the eastern wall. Majesty. Until the restriction is resolved, she cannot be allowed to speak further into the treaty. The renewal may already be compromised. Another noble followed. The border families should be removed until order is restored. Mother Sael did not move. Neither did the others. Their stillness held more courage than the court's polished fear. Anessa looked at the Ember Translation Table. Golden veins trembled beneath the black fireglass, waiting for sound. Not blood, not crown, not permission. Sound. The first binding. Vow-breath. Border consonant. Dragonfire pause. Morric wanted her voice trapped. Fine. She would not give him only hers. Anessa turned to the border elders. Do you remember the response line? Morric snapped. Do not coach witnesses. I am not coaching, Anessa said. I am asking whether the treaty left memory anywhere your office forgot to cut. Mother Sael lifted her chin. We remember. Morric laughed coldly. Family sayings are not legal speech. No, Anessa said. But witness responses. Rhyser looked at her. Still hard. Still not soft. Explain. Anessa did not look grateful. The first clause was never meant to be spoken by a translator alone. The table hears the opening vow, then the border witness response. If the response matches, the treaty binds. If it does not, the renewal fails. Morric's face went still. Too still. Rhyser saw it. So the court has renewed flame. Debt without allowing the response, he said. Morric moved fast. An archaic courtesy, Majesty. The translation office has supplied standardized response language for decades. Anessa looked at the voice roll. In whose voice? Silence. A small thing. A deadly thing. The dead treaty glowed under the witness register, but Anessa lifted one hand before it could rise. No, she whispered. Not yet. She turned toward the elders. Do not repeat me. Speak what your house has kept. Morric stepped forward. Majesty, I object. A restricted consultant is attempting to conduct treaty right through untrained border mouths. Anessa's gaze cut to him. Their mouths were old enough to pay your flame debt. The room shuddered with that. Rhyser's eyes darkened, but he did not apologize. Let them speak. Mother Sael placed one weathered hand on the edge of the table, not on the treaty marks. Beside her, Bram of Ashmile and Ivina of Salt Gate stepped close enough that the fireglass reflected their faces. Their voices were not polished. One was rough. One trembled. One dragged a vowel exactly where Morric had taught the court to laugh. Together, they spoke the response line. Flame shared is flame ended when service is done. The Ember Translation Table answered with a low, golden sound. Not a roar. Recognition. The witness register opened its old heat along the scraped second strokes. The pale cord around it blackened, and beneath the observer column, the missing voice marks rose like thin gold wounds. Morric paled. They have been prompted. Anessa shook her head. No, they were remembered. She pointed to the voice roll, then the witness register, then the old brown ledger. The false system needed 3 silences. Remove the breath mark. Reclassify witnesses as observers. Restrict the one translator who knew the border response. Rhyser looked at the records one by one. The court did too. For once, the evidence did not belong to Morric's hands. Anessa's voice lowered. That is not unstable dialect. That is procedure built around theft. Morric's mouth tightened. Careful. No, she said. You spent years making everyone else careful. The table flared. Golden words climbed the witness register, then stopped at a blank space beneath the standardized response column. There should have been names there. Real voices, houses, witness marks. Instead, the column carried one repeated seal. High Translator's Office. Rhyser leaned in. He supplied the witness responses himself. Morric said, as authorized translator. Anessa looked at him. As replacement witness. The border elders reacted then not loudly, but with a sound like breath leaving a room that had held it for too long. Mother Sael whispered, They made him speak for us? Anessa did not answer. The table did. Across the witness register, beneath the burned observer line, new gold fire revealed the next buried truth. Border witness responses replaced by translator's office. The first treaty dragon skull above the room cracked a tooth. It was a small white shard, no longer than Anessa Lorn's thumb. But when it struck the floor beside the Ember Translation Table, every noble looked up. The hanging bones had watched 6 generations of renewal. They had not moved for any king. Morric Pell seized the silence. Majesty, the room is becoming unstable. The dead treaty has been improperly awakened, the witness register contaminated, and the border response spoken outside approved form. For the safety of the court, I invoke High Translator Emergency Custody. Anessa looked at him. Custody of what? Morric lifted the cracked ivory rod. Of the treaty voice. The border elders recoiled as if the words had touched their throats. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn turned slowly. You claim custody over voices now? Morric bowed. Over legal speech, Majesty, not private breath. Without controlled translation, dead language becomes a weapon. Anessa's mouth tightened. It became a weapon when you held it. Morric ignored her. The renewal must be suspended until the translator's office can restore proper order. The border witnesses should be removed. Mistress Lorn should be detained before she binds further unlawful clauses. The guards near the wall shifted. Not toward Morric. Toward Anessa, Rhyser's hand lifted. They stopped. Still no apology. Still no softness. But he did not let them touch her. Anessa refused to thank him for halting a danger he had helped invite. Instead, she looked at the ledgers stacked under Morric's ivory case. Emergency custody appears in payment records. Morric's eyes cooled. All offices keep accounts. Bring them. He gave a short laugh. A consultant under voice restriction does not command royal accounts. Rhyser's voice cut through the room. I do. Morric went still. Then he smiled, because men like him always had another seal. Majesty, those accounts include border revenue, translator salaries, archive preservation, and flame debt handling fees. Public opening could inflame unrest. Mother Sael stepped forward. It is already inflamed. You only kept us from seeing the fire. Rhyser looked at the old woman, then at the guards. Bring the payment accounts. This time, Morric did not reach for the records. That was how Anessa knew they would hurt him. A clerk returned with 3 narrow account slates bound in white cord. He set them on the table with shaking hands and stepped back quickly, as if payment records might bite. Anessa did not touch them. She looked first at the cords, white court cord, no border knot, then at the payment columns. Flame debt, service remainder, translation custody fee, renewal handling tithe. Each phrase sounded clean enough to pass through noble ears without leaving blood. "Read the custody fee," she said. Morric's jaw tightened. Administrative. Read it. Rhyser opened the first slate himself. Translation custody fee collected from Border Flame. Debt accounts after renewal. Anessa pointed to the small mark beside the fee. "That symbol means voice substitution." Morric snapped. "It means office handling." "No," Anessa said. "It means your office was paid each time a border witness response was replaced." The room changed. The border elders understood first, then the clerks, then the nobles, slowly, unwillingly, as if truth were an ugly guest who had entered wearing their family colors. Morric lifted his chin. "The translator's office maintained stability. You sold silence back to the people you silenced," Anessa said. A sound left Mother Sael then. Not a sob. Something older. The Ember Translation Table warmed beneath the payment slates, but Anessa placed her palm flat above the air, not touching fireglass, not commanding it. "No," she said softly. "Let the accounts stand." She looked at the columns again. The fee appeared after each renewal, always tied to witness substitution, always drawn from flame debt paid by clans whose service had already been fulfilled. "One missing breath made debt," she said. "One false classification removed the witnesses. One office voice replaced them. Then your office collected fees for speaking in their place." Morric's face hardened into something bare. "You think borders survive without court order? Without our language, your clans would still be killing each other over ash fields and broken dragon nests." Anessa stepped closer. "We gave blood to end that war, and received peace. We received invoices." The words struck the table like a blade. Rhyser looked down at the accounts. His face was no longer only hard. Something colder had entered him. Not guilt alone. Ownership of it. "How long?" he asked. Morric did not answer. Anessa read the oldest column. 37 years. Mother Sael closed her eyes. Rhyser said, "How much?" Anessa looked at him then. "Enough that they stopped sending sons to school and started sending daughters to debt houses." The old woman beside her whispered, "My sister." No one laughed. No one breathed loudly. Morric lifted the ivory rod with both hands. "Majesty, if you let this stand, every crown debt can be challenged. The border will demand repayment. The treasury will crack. Your reign will begin with surrender to provincial anger." Rhyser's eyes turned toward Anessa. For a breath, she saw the choice being placed before him. Crown stability or public truth, smooth law or the voice he had let them mock. Anessa did not plead. She had spent enough of her life making truth acceptable to people who profited from not hearing it. She turned to the border elders instead. "Speak the response again," Morric shouted. "If they speak, the treaty may void the renewal." Anessa looked back at him. "Good." The elders stood around the Ember Translation Table. Rough voices, old voices, trembling voices. Together, they spoke the line the court had replaced for 3 generations. "Flame shared is flame ended when service is done." The account slates cracked open. Golden fire ran through every custody fee, every substituted response, every clean column that had made theft look administrative. Across the payment records, the dead treaty burned the truth Anessa had already read. Flame debt collected after service was fulfilled. Flame debt collected after service was fulfilled. The words burned across the payment slates. and the old dragon treaty room became quieter than death. Not because the court did not understand, because it did. Mother Sael stood with one hand on the edge of the Ember Translation Table, her old fingers trembling beside the golden fire that had finally named what paper had hidden. Around her, the border elders did not kneel. They did not thank the Dragon Court for hearing the truth late. They simply stood, worn boots on polished dragonbone floor, while 3 generations of stolen breath lay open before them. Morric Pell lowered the cracked ivory rod. For the first time all night, he looked less like a translator than a man holding a weapon everyone could now see. Majesty, he said carefully, the accounts are not verdict. They require review, interpretation, fiscal reconciliation. If you move too quickly, you will turn the border against the court. Anessa Lorn looked at him. The border is not turning. It is standing where it should have been allowed to stand. The Ember Translation Table glowed softly beneath her words, but did not rise for her. Good. She did not need it to crown her voice. She needed the room to stop stealing it. Dragon King Rhyser Vaelthorn looked at the cracked account slates, the witness register, the archive copy, the voice restriction roll, the ivory rod, and finally Anessa. There was guilt in him now. Not performative, not soft, not useful unless made into law. He turned to the guards. Seal the translator's office. Morric's face tightened. Majesty, remove his rod. 2 guards stepped forward. Morric clutched the ivory rod too late. The moment his fingers tightened around it, the old correction notches flared gold. Vowels widened. Pauses vanished. Debt marks hidden among pronunciation marks burned clear along the length of the rod. The court saw the truth of the tool. Not scholarship, control. Rhyser did not look away. High Translator Morric Pell is stripped of office, seal, and treaty authority. He will stand judgment for falsified translation, unlawful flame debt renewal, witness substitution, and theft under Crown law. Morric's polished face broke. The Crown signed every renewal. The words struck the room harder than accusation. Rhyser did not deny them. That mattered. He looked toward the throne platform where he had sat while they laughed at Anessa's mouth, where he had let velvet ropes divide witness from law, where he had allowed smoothness to pass for peace because smoothness cost him less than listening. Yes, he said. The Crown signed what it did not bother to hear. No one moved. Anessa felt the sentence enter the room like a blade placed flat on a table. It did not heal. It made denial impossible. Rhyser stepped away from the throne platform and stood behind the Ember Translation Table, not above it. By Crown authority, all flame debt renewals drawn from the false conquest line are suspended. Border witness records will be restored. The royal archive will be opened before the families named in these ledgers, and no treaty renewal will bind again without the voice clause spoken by those it governs. A noble lord rose, pale with outrage. Majesty, the treasury. The treasury will return what it kept unlawfully. Another noble whispered, that could ruin houses. Mother Sael looked at him. It already did. The whisper died. Rhyser turned to Anessa. The first line must be restored. Every eye followed his. Anessa understood the trap inside the honor. If she spoke alone, the court could make her a symbol and leave the border still dependent on a single permitted mouth. Morric had ruled that way. One office, one voice, one polished gate. No, she said. Rhyser's face did not soften. No? Anessa held his gaze. Not mine alone. The faintest breath moved through the room. She turned to the border elders. You speak it with me, not as echo, as authority. Morric, held between guards, gave one last bitter laugh. You would let road voices bind dragon law? Anessa looked at him. They already did. You spent 37 years pretending they had not. Mother Sael stepped beside her. Bram of Ashmile came forward. Evina of Saltgate, Talon of Red Crossing. One by one, the border witnesses placed their hands near the table, not on its gold veins, not claiming magic, only standing where law had always required them to stand. Rhyser looked to the court. Hear them. Not allow. Hear. Anessa felt the difference. Small, late, real. She drew a breath. And this time no one corrected the shape of it. By shared flame, she began. The witnesses joined, their accents rough, uneven, living. By kept breath, by border blood given freely, no clan shall owe flame, debt after service is fulfilled. Flame shared is flame ended when service is done. The Ember Translation Table answered. The dead treaty did not speak in Anessa's voice alone. It took the border voices together, held their consonants, their pauses, their smoke-heavy vowels, and returned them through the fireglass as the original law. Golden words rose across the room, not around Anessa's body, not above her head, but across every record Morric had altered. The false conquest line burned away. The observer column split open. The red restriction through Anessa's name vanished from the voice roll. The custody fees blackened into ash. The first treaty dragon skull above them released a long, low crack, and old dust rained down like gray snow. Then the room was still. Rhyser stepped down from the table and faced Anessa before the entire court. I let them call your voice unfit, he said. I let clean speech stand where truth should have stood. That was my failure before it became my discovery. Anessa did not forgive him, in front of people who needed law more than tenderness. But she did not look away. Rhyser seemed to understand. He bowed his head, not as a lover, not as a king granting favor, but as a man placing authority back where he had helped remove it. The treaty record will name Anessa Lorn as first restorer of the original clause, he said, not because the table chose her, because she knew the word and spoke when we tried to shame it silent. The border elders bowed to Anessa. The court did not know what to do. That was enough. Anessa looked at the Ember Translation Table. Its dead gold veins cooled slowly beneath the restored first line. It had not blessed her accent. It had remembered the vow-breath the court had buried. Rhyser stood beside her now, close but not touching. Will you oversee the restoration? He asked quietly. Anessa looked at the ropes on the floor, the open ledgers, the elders no longer behind the court, and the king who had finally learned to stand beneath the truth instead of above it. I will oversee the language, she said. The border will oversee the debt. A faint, dangerous, almost smile touched his mouth. Then the court will learn to listen. Anessa's voice stayed low, smoke-heavy, uncorrected. Yes, she said, it will. And for the first time in the old dragon treaty room, peace sounded like the border.